Good evening, everybody. First out, I want to give all honor and glory to God, for without Him, we can do nothing. With Him, we can do all things, and that's including abolish the death penalty. Um, Last week, we talked about things that 2020 left out of that show, and I do understand that they couldn't put in everything, but I believe there was key stuff that was left out, and there's key stuff that has been left out um, of my brother's case, period. And that goes back to what we first opened with last week. We were talking about DNA. And so I want to go into that a little bit further and just let you know things that the jury never heard, or the public doesn't know about the case, evidence that's out there that they haven't heard about, and evidence that they don't even realize that has not even been entered into the court. And so last week we were talking about the DNA that was on the beer cans, okay? And that's what we started out with. And I want to go into that a little bit further. I want to break that down a little bit. Now, I want everybody to understand how that came to be. And during my brother's trial, Lydia Clay Jackson and Calvin Garvey were his court-appointed attorneys. And the trial's going on, but yet none of my brother's witnesses were being called. And Rodney couldn't figure out why wasn't anybody being called. And according to Rodney, he said that they said they didn't have enough time to get things together. So Rodney was in his cell and he was looking over everything. He was looking over, files, pictures, and everything else. And he saw these beer cans that were laying around, right there on the crime scene, around the body. And he told his attorneys to have those tests, and they didn't want to do it. They said, Rodney, that's garbage. That's not gonna help us. And Rodney demanded that they tested the DNA on these cans. So they took it to the prosecution. The prosecution relayed the same basic response that, hey, that's trash, but we'll allow it. So it was allowed. The DNA was tested. And the crazy about that thing is, not only what the test revealed, but how they withheld those tests until after the trial. While the trial was going on, that those tests, the findings from those tests, should I say, should have been released to the defense. But yet they were turned over to the prosecution. And when the prosecution found out that the DNA that were on these beer cans, which belonged to Stacy Stites, David Hall, and Ed Samella, they withheld that evidence. They did not reveal that. Uh, they didn't even release it to the defense until after they sentenced my brother to death. So, in all actuality, Calvin Garvey and Lydia Clay Jackson's court-appointed attorneys did not even have a chance to even mention that because they did not know about that. And that's what you call a Brady violation, when they withhold evidence knowingly, you know. And that in itself, it should be enough grounds right there to grant Rodney Reed a fair trial. And like I said before in the show earlier, a lot of people may differ on Rodney's guilt or innocence. But from these facts that I'm stating right now, I'm pretty sure we all can agree that he did not receive a fair trial. And that's all the Reed family has ever wanted, is a fair trial, a chance to let the evidence and facts and witnesses speak for themselves so Rodney Reed can free himself. Don't free Rodney Reed. Give him a fair trial. We want him exonerated. We want his name, we want his record clear. But going on on with that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that DNA. So the DNA that was also found at that crime scene, as I spoke last week, they found Caucasian hair, they found bodily fluids, saliva, they found all sorts of kind of stuff. They found other fingerprints, but nothing belonged to Rodney Reed. But lo and behold, still to this day, the test results of some of that DNA has not even came back yet. And it's 20-some years later. Do you hear me? Magically lost. There were DNA testings that were shipped out to be tested that ended up in a Walmart in Kansas somewhere. And that sounds far-stretched, but it's the truth. These are documents that you can find. These are things that some of the DNA findings was never actually came back. Some of them went to other places, was routed, and then came back. You want to talk about stuff en route. After they bagged Stacy's body and they were taking it to the medical examiner's office to be further tested and stuff like this here. There's a timeline there, from where the body was found here in Bastrop to the medical examiner's office. Okay, and there's a gap of time in there. There's 2 hours. There's 2 hours, over 2 hours and something between the time that can't be accounted for, and then the pictures of the body on the scene that they took, and then the body after they got it to the crime lab, they didn't match. It seems to be other wounds and stuff to the body. Now these things I know because we have files. We have all the files, everything from A to Z, and we're going to be going into these files after I consult with some of my brother's attorneys and everything, so I can make sure that I'm putting out what they want to be put out. But at the end of the day, what I really want, what I'm trying to do, is put out the truth. And so, think about that. Now, there were witnesses, as I stated. Rodney's key alibi witness, Chris Ulrich, who was with him that night. The murder was occurred. It was never called. Like I said, there were family members and everybody else, but I'm talking about that particular night. His alibi witness was never called to the stand. Why is that? You know, and then we have other witnesses that came forward after the years, to testify in the case, such as Alicia Slater, a woman that had moved away from here and for years and had no reason to lie, or didn't know Rodney from Adam, but knew the truth and did what God would have her to do, to say what she knew. And now you got people out there saying bad things, writing bad things, because a woman did what was right, did what you would want them to do if you were in our shoes, to step forward. But now you want to try to hurt somebody for telling the truth. Well, shame on you, because, at the end of the day, the truth always remains the same. Yesterday, today, and forever. It doesn't change. But we have other witnesses that have come forth, you know, to testify to Rodney's relationship with Stacy. People wrote documents and everything else. And yet, a lot of these things have not been admitted, the time of death, that is crucial. And we talked about Dr. Baden, Dr. Spitz and Dr. Riddick and everything else, and they did their own independent studies, and they came up with all the same conclusion that there's no way medically and scientifically Rodney Reed could have committed these crimes. And then you go into Dr. Phil, how he had his own medical examiner do his own independent study and come up with the same findings. You have all these things out there, that point to the truth. Uh, but yet, here we are sitting right here, and I'm having to do a show, talk about the things that 2020 left out, talk about things that people haven't heard before, or maybe even forgotten in this case, and it's kind of frustrating. Last week when we started this, I was having some back problems and stuff. Took some medication. I really wasn't focused as I should have been on it, but I'm better now. But we're going to talk about also the key, the keys to the Rodney Reed case, and that's what we've been currently talking about is the DNA and the time of death and everything else, and the fact that just straight up he didn't get a fair trial, you know what I mean, and everything. Um, but there was so much stuff left off of that 2020 special that I want to talk about, because we spent days, my brothers, other family members, interviewing in front of these people, telling our side of the story. And we wasn't in that 2020 piece. We didn't even get a chance to have one line or say one word. None of my brothers did, and we all spoke out and talked about the things that we knew. Um, there was even other witnesses and people that was willing to just be on the show. None of that was aired. You know what I mean? And a lot of key stuff was left out, and that's what I mean. I'm grateful. Don't get it twisted by any means that 2020 did this special, but I think they could have did a greater job, because any time we can get uh, Rodney Reed name out there, I'm grateful for that. But I think they could have did a better job. Um, Also, what we're gonna do is go later in the show and talk about things that are coming up. Matter of fact, I want to do that now, because on the 19th of this month at 3 p.m. at the Bastrop County Courthouse, we're going to have a demonstration there. We're going to have a demonstration outside, and it's to celebrate Rodney's birthday, and also to protest, his wrongful incarceration. You know what I mean? And so we encourage people to come out with masks and stand with us. We will be going YouTube live on that. What we're going to do there, and it's going to be real short because of the COVID stuff. There's only going to be a couple of speakers. That's going to be myself and my mom, and we're going to say a few words about Rodney's current situation, status, and just talk on how we feel about celebrating yet another birthday, without our family member, her son, and my brother being with us. And as I tell people all the time, my family's not whole again, and we're struggling. And this isn't easy to do. Is to come across and do these things and tell, do these stories, but it's a must that we do these things. Anyway, so we're having that on the 19th, and there's going to be a caravan as well. So if you want to join the caravan, make poster boards saying "Free Rodney Reed" or whatever, put them on your car. We're gonna drive around Bastrop a little bit, everybody, you know what I mean, and then we're gonna break off, and that's going to be on the 19th at 3 p.m. We're going to meet at the Bastrop County District Attorney's Office right over there at the courthouse. So everybody, look for that, watch for that, join that if you can, in support of us. Um, tonight's show is tonight's show is going to be kind of fairly short, but Juana is going to say something. She's going to make an announcement here as well about what's going on.
All right, so we have opened up for questions, and I asked, did anyone have any questions for you? And then Dallas for Change, shout out to Dallas for Change. They say, great to see you, Roderick. Is everything you're going to talk about outlined somewhere in a Google Doc, blog, or something?
Well, everything that I'm talking about is comes from the files that we have at our house. Okay, and what I am going to start doing, I'm going to start pulling those files and reading directly from them files in future episodes. I'm just trying to get people to just follow me, and as we go further, we'll get deeper and deeper into those files. All right. And if there's any other questions that anybody have for me, I'd be glad to answer them. Um, right now, we talk about they talk about the timeline, which is very crucial in uh, that death, the Stacy's death. You know, and as they reported, Stacy was killed well before 12 midnight, according to 4 medical examiners, well known. And at that time, that puts Stacy at home, admittedly, with Jimmy Fennell. And a lot of people don't know this and haven't heard these things. And it's very, very, very crucial that we have these things admitted. See, these things haven't been admitted. And those things should have been talked about in 2020, the timeline and everything else, in which they briefly talked on, but should have been further elaborated on. There are other things that proves his innocence that we have not yet talked about, and we'll go into in further shows. But I'm gonna close this one kind of early. I have a prior appointment, but you people keep in mind, have people to subscribe to us. Read Justice Initiative Amplified is what we're doing here, and we're just trying to point out the truth. We're just trying to get the truth out there. We're not trying to embellish on it. We're just trying to tell it like it is. And so, with that, y'all tune in next week, and we'll go directly into some of those files and start breaking things down on a deeper basis. That's it. Y'all have a good night.